Did Kevin Durant and Draymond Green just drop the biggest bombshell of the NBA offseason? What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. I am Sean Murphy, and today we're talking about the fact that we have finally gotten the real reason why Kevin Durant has left the Golden State Warriors. And this reason comes from an interview with Draymond Green on his new series Chip on Bleacher Report. And the reason is very, very interesting. In the interview conducted with Bleacher Report, Durant told Green, quote, "It wasn't the argument. It was the way that everybody, Steve Kerr, acted like it didn't happen. Bob Myers tried to just discipline you and think that would put the mask over everything." And Draymond Green later had to go into a conversation with Bob Myers and with Steve Kerr when they told him in an hour-and-a-half conversation that he needed to apologize to Kevin Durant. And after that, they told him to sleep on it. And he came back the next day and they asked him, "Are you ready to apologize?" And Green said, and I quote, "Y'all are about to fuck this up. I said the only person who can make this right is me and KD. And there is nothing that y'all can do. And y'all are going to fuck this up." And in my opinion, they fucked it up. And Durant repeated, "I think so too." So, we have a situation where a dynasty, perhaps the greatest dynasty we've had since the Miami Heat back in 2009, 2010, I would argue the best dynasty we've had since the Michael Jordan Bulls, where they won 2 championships in a row, would have won a third if Kevin Durant didn't get injured. You now have 2 of your stars on that team saying that the ultimate demise were the people in the front office. By the way, which is what was also the ultimate demise of the Chicago Bulls. Another thing that was really interesting was in the interview was Kevin Durant citing The Last Dance as something that he wished would have happened with this team. He said, "I remember watching The Last Dance, and when Scottie Pippen didn't go into the game, the whole team in the locker room said, 'Scottie, that was fucked up that you didn't do that.' We needed that. We just needed to throw all that shit on the table and say, 'Yo, Dre, K, that was fucked up that we even had to go through that. Let's just wipe our hands and with it and go finish the task.' I don't think we did that. We just tried to dance around it. I just didn't like just the vibe between all of that. It just made shit weird to me." Now, it's not uncommon for dynasties to ultimately fall apart because of ego. And let's remember, Kevin Durant ultimately went to the Golden State Warriors in pursuit of a championship and to be in a winning culture and a winning situation. To play alongside other stars like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green for the rest of his career was something that didn't really seem entirely realistic. In fact, the move in itself was extremely unprecedented, something that nobody saw coming. But then to hear and to see how quickly this all fell apart, to see when it fell apart, now to hear why it fell apart, to see that it happened this way, especially with a Golden State Warriors front office and Bob Myers, who is one of the best GMs in the league, and then also Steve Kerr, who was part of that Michael Jordan dynasty, was part of the San Antonio Spurs dynasty, is one of the winningest men in the history of basketball, and they just tried to brush off this situation and act like everything's fine. Mind you, with Kevin Durant and Draymond Green, you know, the 2 most sensitive players, not only on that team, but in the NBA? Huh? Because even though this dynasty did end very abruptly, and after 2 straight NBA championships and a 3rd straight finals appearance, it did leave a lot of questions as into what if? What if this roster stayed healthy? What if Kevin Durant didn't tear his Achilles? What if Klay Thompson didn't tear his ACL? What if Kevin Durant ultimately decided to come back that next year? Now, Kevin Durant is a part of another superpower in the NBA in the Brooklyn Nets. Draymond Green still on the Warriors, trying to gear up and contend in the Western Conference again. And now we're just faced with this question of what this NBA would look like if this team had stayed together. Now, the other question in this is, what does this say about Bob Myers? What does this say about Steve Kerr? Does this crank up the pressure? Does this crank up the heat on them going forward, saying that they're going to have to succeed and they're going to have to do things quite special in order to keep their jobs secure? Because mind you, if you're losing Kevin Durant and helping with the demise of the greatest assembling of players arguably we've ever had in the NBA, I mean, mind you, the Chicago Bulls, the 96 Bulls were just a different level of team, but at the time, that was just Michael Jordan coming back to the team that was already there. This is a global superpower going and joining other global superpowers. This is like the Avengers teaming with the Justice League type of thing. Personally, I think this demise, as I said, I think it was inevitable. I think it was a situation where Kevin Durant was only going to be so happy for so long. And one of the things that they talk about in this interview too is about how Kevin Durant and Draymond Green are both the types to go on Twitter and respond to fans and tell them straight up what they're thinking and how they're feeling. And it's one of those situations where you can't tell me that Kevin Durant was just going to be cool with getting all of that hate for all these years, because he still gets that hate and he talks about it and he's always going to. And it's always something that's clearly going to put a chip on his shoulder. Granted, it put 2 chips onto his collection. It put 2 rings on his finger. But at the end of the day, is that worth it for him? Was that worth it for him in the long term? In the past interview, Kevin Durant admitted that winning these championships wasn't even something that made him happy. It wasn't the ultimate thing, and it wasn't the thing to make him happy like he thought it was going to. So maybe even though this Warriors experiment was extremely successful from a basketball standpoint, it clearly wasn't a successful one for Kevin Durant's overall well-being. And maybe this is just another part of it, is that Kevin Durant had to go into a situation where he wasn't entirely comfortable, where he didn't quite see eye to eye with the front office and with the management, with Bob Myers and with Steve Kerr. I mean, there were rumblings that Steve Kerr and Kevin Durant didn't quite get along the entire time, so this would definitely line up with that, but it makes you question, was there a point they did get along? And what does this say? Like, how do Warriors players respond to this about Steve Kerr? Because the other thing was that the Warriors dynasty, the people that were there, like, you know, Clay and Steph are seen as lifers. And Draymond Green, I would imagine that this franchise would want to see him be a lifer as well. To have this be the ending to that dynasty and perhaps even to their championship window, how does that sit with those guys? And at the end of the day, I think a big thing that this says too is that dynasties are fickle and they are tricky for a reason. You have to sustain a level of success that is historic over multiple years of time. And there's a reason why we haven't seen a team three-peat since the LA Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. And even then, that dynasty fell apart. So it's one of those things where for me, as a Michael Jordan guy, that points to the greatness of that Bulls dynasty, that they had 2 three-peats in a row, despite all of the dysfunction with Jerry Krause, with Phil Jackson, with their owner, with the entire organization and the tensity between the players and the front office. And this just shows that even teams like the Warriors, who seem so bulletproof on the outside, are clearly more human and less functional than we imagine. And that's part of that team's greatness, is that they were able to shield that, and even dealing with that vibe, even having something that didn't sit right with them, to make it to the finals is something that's truly remarkable too. So when we look back on this situation in NBA history, we look back at this time, this team, this is going to just add another complicated chapter to what is the greatness of the Warriors dynasty. Ultimately, I think this is something that they can look past. This is something that they can just rub off their shoulders. They can forget that this happened, and ultimately they can celebrate what they were able to do together. But it does make you question, how do you keep that dynasty going? What could have happened to change this? And what does this say about Bob Meyer, and what does this say about Steve Kerr going forward? And now I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think Kevin Durant and Draymond Green were ever going to last beyond 3 seasons together? Do you think there's a scenario where Kevin Durant decides to even try to team with these guys again? I mean, he just signed a big contract with Brooklyn, so I would probably say no. But hey, I guess you can never say never, right? But this is just another situation with another cautionary tale that egos can ultimately get in the way, even on a team-oriented culture and roster that is Golden State. And with this, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Warriors' dynamic in that roster works going forward, because Draymond Green, I'm pretty sure he's a free agent coming up in the next couple of years. Who says he doesn't try to leave? And with that, there's going to be a lot that we'll be paying attention to going forward, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how all this plays out. I'm hoping that we hear from Bob Meyer. I'm hoping that we hear from Steve Kerr. I would love to hear their responses, and I would love to learn more from their perspective. But with that, hey, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching this Thursday video. It's always going to be something different each and every week. But with that interview, with that topic, there's no way we couldn't talk about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time from Half Court. Give us a subscribe.